day 526 of the Trump administration. And the president tonight says he will announce his choice for the Supreme Court next month.
I'll be announcing it the Monday after July 4th. I'll be announcing it on the 9th.
We will have more on the president's list of nominees just ahead, but we begin with the war between the Trump White House and the Department of Justice, specifically the president's own Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein, the man overseeing the special counsel's Russia investigation. The president and his allies in Congress have been hammering Rosenstein over this Mueller inquiry, and the House has given the Deputy Attorney General until July 6 to turn over some sensitive documents related to that investigation. Some House Republicans have floated the threat of holding Rosenstein in contempt of Congress, a potential first step to his possible impeachment if he doesn't comply with this request. This afternoon, Trump was asked about that.
I think the whole thing is going to work out. I think that he'll give what is necessary. I really believe it's going to work out very easily between Rod and between the rest of the group. I think they'll get what they need.
We should explain these are comments recorded by audio and not video when the president visited reporters in the back of Air Force One flying from Andrews to North Jersey for the weekend. You may recall Rosenstein wrote the memo, in effect the cover story that the White House used to justify the firing of former FBI Director James Comey. Here's what Rosenstein said about that decision.
So with regard to the Russia investigation, do you stand by your recommendation to fire James Comey?
I've testified several times about this, and yes, I do.
Tonight, the New York Times is shedding new light on Rosenstein's private anger over, quote, being used to rationalize Comey's dismissal. Michael Schmidt, who's standing by to join us tonight, reports that in the days after the firing, Rosenstein said, quote, the experience damaged his reputation. According to 4 people familiar with his outbursts, he alternately defended his involvement, expressed remorse at the tumult it unleashed, said the White House had manipulated him, fumed how the news media had portrayed the events, and said the full story would vindicate him, said the people. According to one person with whom he spoke shortly after Mr. Comey's firing, Mr. Rosenstein was shaken, unsteady, overwhelmed. Another person in touch with Mr. Rosenstein around that time said he sounded frantic, nervous, upset, and emotionally dysregulated. And we do have some other news tonight about this Mueller investigation. Today, the special counsel asked a judge for another delay in the actual sentencing of the former Trump National Security Advisor Mike Flynn. Flynn's been working for the feds, but this is the 3rd time his sentencing has been put off. Also, for the first time, a member of Mueller's team is speaking out publicly about the investigation into Paul Manafort, Trump's one-time campaign chairman. An FBI agent testified in Virginia court today that Manafort's personal assistant gave him access to a storage locker that contained boxes of financial documents. Josh Gerstein of Politico, who will join us in a moment, reported on another wrinkle that emerged from that FBI agent's testimony. He writes, quote, a meeting last year where Associated Press reporters discussed with federal officials the news outlet's investigation of Paul Manafort's finances may have led the FBI to a storage locker the Bureau raided. So a lot to talk about. The panel's standing by. But first, we want to get more on the aforementioned Michael Schmidt, Pulitzer Prize-winning Washington correspondent for the New York Times. He is with us by telephone. Michael, talk us through an 8-day period. What was happening in the turnaround from the Comey firing to the Mueller hiring?
So Donald Trump wanted to send a letter to James Comey about why he was firing him, but the White House counsel did not think that was a good idea. So he brought the Attorney General and the Deputy Attorney General over to the White House to talk about this, and Rosenstein agreed to write a memo about the firing. That memo was later used by the White House as the basis, the explanation for why the president was firing Comey. The interesting thing about the letter, though, was that it was about how Comey had been too mean to Hillary Clinton during the campaign and had mishandled the email investigation.
It was an odd cover story, and in real time that afternoon, that evening, as we were covering the dismissal of Comey, people were casting doubt with each word as they read it, people on this network and others. It was an odd thing to pin the dismissal of Comey on.
Correct, especially with a very high-profile Russia investigation beginning to intensify over the administration. It was a sort of an odd way of explaining this incredibly powerful political moment for the president, which Rosenstein, it blew back on him. He became the scapegoat, and he was widely criticized for his role in it. And within that 8-day period, he receives a lot of pressure from the FBI and ultimately decides to appoint Mueller after learning that Trump had asked Comey to end the investigation into Mike Flynn, his former national security advisor. And obviously that decision probably being the biggest one to impact the president since he came into office.
Before we let you go, one more question, and that is, how does Jeff Sessions figure in your story for those who haven't had a chance to read it yet?
Well, Jeff Sessions figures well because he recused himself from the Russia investigation right after he was sworn in at the beginning of 2017. So he does not have to deal with the Russia investigation. He is shielded from it. And that's why Rosenstein is the person that Republicans are attacking. He is the person who oversees Mueller. He is the one that will decide whether Mueller can move forward with things, whether he can indict people, whether he can send a report to Congress. It is all in Rod Rosenstein's hands.
Michael Schmidt, our thanks for joining us by telephone this Friday night, following your story on this subject for the New York Times today. We want to turn now to our leadoff panel. On a Friday evening, the aforementioned Josh Gerstein, senior White House reporter for Politico, Joe Weinbanks, attorney and former assistant Watergate special counsel, and Guy Lewis is back with us, a former U.S. attorney who's worked with Mueller, Comey, and Rosenstein, among others, while at DOJ. Guy, I'd actually like to begin with you, and we'll do so after we replay kind of a collection of the not-so-great hits from that House hearing yesterday and the various ways they came after Rod Rosenstein.
They talk about the Mueller investigation. It's really the Rosenstein investigation. You appointed Mueller. You're supervising Mueller.
And I want to know why you won't give us what we've asked for.
Sir, I certainly hope that your colleagues are not under that impression. That is not accurate, sir. And
it is accurate. We have caught you hiding
Mr. Chairman, can we allow the witness to answer?
Your statement that I'm personally keeping information from you, trying to conceal information.
You're the boss, Mr. Rosenstein.
That's correct. And my job is to make sure that we respond to your concerns. We have, sir.
So, Guy Lewis, in normal times, a career prosecutor at the Justice Department, a Republican for all we know, would enjoy ample air cover from the White House. This appears to be whatever the opposite of that is. As a former Fed yourself, how does this guy, who you know, hang on?
Brian, I got to tell you, it was a tough week without question for Rod. The hearings were brutal in the sense of you really did have a career Republican, former assistant U.S. attorney, former loyal U.S. attorney, former deputy attorney general in the tax division, attacked viciously by other Republicans. I mean, you remember, of course, Ronald Reagan's old adage of the 11th commandment. Thou shalt not attack another Republican. And, of course, they threw that Bible out the window and they just viciously attacked Rod. I did watch the hearing, and I think Rod stood up. He gave it right back to him. He's a tough guy, and I think Rod's going to weather the storm. I really do. All
right. Well, thank you for that prediction. Jill, do you think Rosenstein is a bigger witness for the prosecution or the defense in this case, and what does all that mean for him?
I think he has done an admirable job in withstanding the attacks on him, which have been viciously personal and completely inappropriate. It's almost unheard of for a Republican senator to attack in the way he was attacked. He's done a wonderful job of keeping his head and answering the questions as best he could, even when being cut off and not being allowed to speak. I think that he ultimately is going to do the right thing and keep this investigation going as he has. unless they continue to attack him and actually fire him. And that would lead to a huge public outcry by Republicans and Democrats. So I think he's much more on the prosecution side and in defending Mueller and the special prosecution going forward.
Josh, I got to say, just looking at him, I hope the guy has a supportive family and a hobby, because he is under as much pressure as any public official right now that we've seen. And Josh, because you've been around a while, when you read about, in Mike Schmidt's story, the genuine despair, that list of modifiers and emotions we used at the top of the broadcast, how does that strike you?
Well, I know that a lot of Rosenstein's friends were mystified by the situation that he found himself in May of last year. He's a veteran bureaucratic operator in the Justice Department nearly 3 decades. So this is not somebody wet behind the ears, unfamiliar with the interaction between the White House and the Justice Department and how to manage it. And so there ended up being 2 camps. A number of people thought that Rosenstein had just made a serious error in judgment in how to handle this situation. And some others thought he had made some kind of deal, that it was some effort to ingratiate himself by writing this letter for the White House, and to ingratiate himself with the new White House for reasons that are not entirely clear. And now, I think in part as a result of that 1 week or so in May, he finds himself really in a Faustian bargain here that has caused all this trouble between him and Republicans on Capitol Hill.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.